Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you're just joining us, I know this looks a little bit different than normal. I am trying to record this using PowerPoint instead of using WebEx because my WebEx data is full and I couldn't get anybody to empty it for today's meetings. So we're going to try it this way. It may be a disaster. We'll just see how it goes. I've never done this before, so we're going to see how it goes. But I'm going to get where I can see the chat. So let's just take a minute. If everybody will use the QR code, I also just put it into the chat to go ahead and sign into the meeting, and then I'll show it again at the end of the presentation for you guys to sign out of the meeting. And while you're doing that, I'll just go ahead and get started on a few things I want to talk about before going into the slides. One fantastic thing to announce that you should have seen, hopefully you got word of yesterday, or should have seen in Erica's email that went out yesterday. But we did get our funding for FY26 dropped yesterday by the feds, so we are getting our funding. We call it FY26, the feds call it FY25, but that we did get the grant award notice on yesterday that that we are getting our funding for this next year. So that is fantastic news. So any worries that we've had over the past month or so we're good to go. We have plenty of funding to get your program started, or to carry out your programs for this school year. Now, just to put this, I don't know if it'll continue. It was really, I think it was a very good sign that the funds were released, even though some of the other funding sources that were frozen haven't been released yet. But I think the public reached out to this current administration and just really rallied for the 21st Century Program because a lot of things I heard was just that it was a program that really is nonpartisan. It helps it helps everybody, whether no matter what your political party is, and really whatever your income is. It helps working parents have a safe place to have their kids in the afternoons, and it increases academics. And so those funds were released. So we're good for at least a year. Now, what I have been told is that, that the 21st Century Program was zeroed out in the president's budget for next year. However, his budget is just really a suggestion from what I've been told. In Tiffany Kessler's presentation at Mega last week, that only a few people, or just the LEA program directors not program directors, I'm sorry, federal programs directors were invited to. She just kind of spoke about how often the president's budget is not even looked at really when determining funding for the next year. It's really more of Congress that makes those decisions. So hopefully we won't have any problems in the future, and the program will continue to be supported. But we know we're good for at least another year, so that's really good news. I'm trying to think, there was something else that I wanted to mention to you guys. Some questions have come up about when you have to start your programs. So the question was asking if your first day of school is like on a Wednesday or a Thursday, do you have to start your 21st Century Program on that first day of school? The answer to that is no, you don't. You need to start your program on the first day of the first full week of school. So if your first week is only a couple of days long, you can go ahead and start your program if you want to, but you don't have to. But we do expect you to start it on the first day of the first full week of school. So probably the following Monday is when you would start your program. I know that there has been some pushback from some CSFOs, especially because in some cases it was because the funds were uncertain. They didn't want programs to start until the funds actually dropped. The 2026 funds dropped, which means that programs wouldn't start until October. But please let your CSFOs let them know that the expectation is for you to start your program the first full week of school. If there's continued pushback on this, then the only other option, I've spoken with Dr. Killingsworth about this, and we both agreed that the only other option is just to return the funds and say you're not going to participate in the 21st Century program. So your options are to start the first full week of school or return the funds and not get the grant. That's the expectation of the feds, is that we start the programs on the first day of school. Really, the first day of school is when it's supposed to start. And so we understand there's some extra hoops that some of you may have to jump through in order to get reimbursed for funds prior to October 1st. But we do have those systems getting put in place for you to do that. And so, so just not wanting to jump through those extra hoops is not a good enough excuse to wait to start your programs. They need to go ahead and start. Now, I know school starts really, really soon. I've also heard from some sites that their administrators or whoever's in charge of their LEAs was not letting them hire people until they had more certainty about the program. But now that everything is certain, that we definitely have our funding, that hiring needs to go ahead and take place as quickly as possible and get your programs started as quickly as possible. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I haven't had a chance to go through the exact numbers of who was at Mega last week and who was not for the Thursday mandatory meeting, but I do know that not everybody was there. Some people had a really good excuse as to why they weren't there. One of those I just mentioned being, because of the uncertainty in funding. They weren't allowed to hire site coordinators yet, so they didn't have those in place at the time. And that's understandable, that's justifiable, but please understand that when we at the State Department say a meeting is mandatory, it is mandatory. And when we say it's mandatory for all program directors and site coordinators, we mean that. So we will be setting up another in-person meeting for program directors and site coordinators who were not at last week's meeting to come to. It will be mandatory, and if they do not come, then there's a very good chance that your program will not get funded for this coming year. We need you guys to do your part and participate in the meetings that are mandatory. One of the things that we did during last week's meeting was walk you through your RFA. We want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to do that. And that's something that really needs to be done in person, which is why we did it this past week. We didn't spend as much time on it as I would like to have spent on it, but we probably will spend more time on that when we do have this upcoming meeting. I don't know when it's going to be yet. We'll have to find a location for it. We may do like one in the north and one in the south to try to make it more convenient, but we'll just have to see what is available and where we can have that meeting at. But please make sure you get those staff in place so that they can attend required meetings. Also, I know last I checked, a lot of sites did not have everybody had not watched all the videos of the trainings that we've had up to this point yet. That is another mandatory thing that has to occur. So please make sure that you're passing those videos on to all program directors and site coordinators, and that they're watching the video, and that they're using the QR code at the beginning of the video to sign in, and then the one at the end to sign out. So that we have that evidence that they participated in that meeting and watched the entire thing. Now, of course, could you sign in and then go watch TV for a couple hours and then come back and sign out? Obviously, you could do that, but we are hoping that nobody would do that here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We are hoping that we don't have to worry about that and that you guys will watch the videos. I know that they can be boring. It's just me talking. I don't blame you for not wanting to listen to that, but it is important information that everybody needs to know, and it's really important that everybody participates in these meetings. Okay, so now that I've gone off on that rant, let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to go over today. We should be able to cover everything today that is left of our trainings. I don't think that we're going to have to have another meeting, other than we are probably going to have another easy reports meeting that's more specific, that'll be ran by TPI. But I'm going to touch on some easy report things today. But other than that, I think we're going to be done with this being the last major training that we have. So that's good news. I've already dropped the link in the chat, Lindsay. So I did that a few minutes ago. So it should be already there. Let me know if you can't see it. I can try to drop it again. Okay. All right. So we're going to start by talking about ES2s. I'm sorry, I'm having to use my mouse and it's really touchy. But we're going to talk about ES2s first. And so these are the expenditure reports. Of course, it will let me go back. Let's see. Okay, fun times. All right. Okay, so let me get all these pop up. Okay, so CBOs, actually both CBOs and LEAs should be submitting their ES2s on a monthly basis. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But CBOs especially, it's a little bit more of a commitment, because along with your ES2 form, we ask you to also upload documents that go with your ES2. It's not that we're trying to pick on CBOs, it's just LEAs. From experience, LEAs tend to have more experience working with federal grants and understand the rules and regulations around procurement when it comes to federal funds, when CBOs may have not had that kind of experience before, or at least maybe didn't have people monitoring it carefully. And so we tend to find that CBOs tend to make mistakes on things more often than an LEA. And so what we do is when an ES2 is submitted for a CBO, we do ask that all the documentation be submitted along with that ES2, and our staff, the ALSDE staff, reviews that documentation to make sure it matches up with the ES2 report, make sure that nothing was purchased that's not allowed, and that sort of thing. Now, I will say this, the better you are about submitting reports and them not having mistakes in it, the less you'll have to do this. Okay, so I had a conversation with Dr. Killingsworth several months ago about how this was sort of an unfair process. The fact that we have CBOs that they have to do this monthly, but our LEAs do not. And she encouraged me to also look at LEA documentation every now and then, to make it more equitable, but also to award CBOs by not making them always have to submit their documentation if they're doing a good job with their ES2s. And so I've told the ALSDE staff that if they have CBOs that don't make mistakes, they submit several in a row and everything is good, they're not trying to claim reimbursement for things that are not allowable, their numbers match up, everything works out good, then they can give them a break and not necessarily have to check their documentation every month. And that would be, easier on us, it would be easier on the CBO, but instead, every now and then we can check the LEA's documentation, especially if that LEA is doing some practices that we're a little bit concerned about, if they kind of are in the medium to high risk level. We'll talk about risk levels in a little bit. Then we may start asking to see some of the LEA documentation that goes with their ES2s as well, just to try to make this a little bit more equitable. Please note that when you do create your ES2s, when you're submitting the portion about personnel, that you're only submitting funding sources. You're only submitting the 21st, the part of their pay that is paid with 21st century funds. So if you have personnel that's paid through another funding source, that should not be included in your ES2s when you submit it. That gets really confusing. So let's just say if you have a staff member that gets paid to work during the school day, and then they get paid with 21st Century to work for your program, or let's even say it a different way. Maybe part of their income comes from um, maybe ARI funds or OMI funds, and then part of their income comes from 21st Century. We just want you to report to us the 21st Century portion so that there's not confusion, and it doesn't look like you're double dipping or anything like that. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your ES2s. Okay, so when you go into eGap, you can search for ES2s in multiple ways. You can go to the organization or the district, and you can search through fund request by fiscal year, by the grant, or by the status. Um, there's also a special option display where you can search under paid or unpaid requests to easily see the status of all of your funding requests when you're looking for ES2s. Okay, so it kind of looks like what is on the screen here. And then there's also a project summary page. So through this project summary page, you have access to create requests and view past requests. Your project information has been added. Okay, so you'll have your project begin date, end date, the allocation, an available budget, and then it will show each of the ES2s that have been submitted at that time. So at this time, there had not been, evidently maybe somebody had started on an ES2, the draft had been started, but they hadn't submitted it yet in this picture. But it will show us every time one is submitted, and then if it actually has gone through, we can click on it and it will give us more details about the ES2s. Now what you see is different than what I see. So I'm going by what these screens, I actually stole this presentation from someone else. So I haven't ever actually seen it from you guys' point of view, but we're hoping that these slides are actually correct and this is what you see. Okay, so you have the sections page, and there is under sections, you have the related documents, and this is optional unless specified by us, in which case a validation will be present. So we do specify, this is where under related documents is where you would upload your documentation to support your ES2. So this would be mainly CBOs that would be asked to do this, but again, this coming year, we may ask an LEA to do this every now and then, just so that we can just kind of do a little check here and there to make sure that all of the expenditures that are being done are in compliance with the grant. Okay. Okay, and then there is also a request page. I didn't even know that this existed until I pulled these slides and read it. So there is a place, a justification of need, where there's actually a couple of text boxes under the request page where you can actually request for an advance amount in excess of 10% of your available budget. So I didn't even know that was an option. I've asked, Carla was in on the last meeting. I asked her if she'd ever seen anybody do this before. She said no. So I need to check into this a little bit more to see if this is an option and actually how it works. But evidently there is an option in here where you can request an advance amount on your cash balance. So not exactly sure how that works, but that is evidently in the system. Your CSFOs may know better than I do, but if that's something you're interested in doing, just let us know and we can look into this a little bit further. I'm gonna look further into it either way, in case the question ever does come up. But this is where you put in all of your information about your ES2 and your funding requests. Okay. Okay, so this is what is important to me, all right? Please, please, please try to submit your ES2s on a monthly basis, okay? It's very highly encouraged. Whenever you get behind, it just causes issues all across the board. And so do your best to submit those expenditure reports monthly, okay? However, there are quarterly expenditure report due dates that were in the RFA that we do expect you to stick to, okay? And they're shown here on the screen. So I have set up reminders that on November 15th, either I will or your ALSD specialist will go in and make sure that you have all of your expenditure reports submitted from July 1st to September 30th. Okay? Then on February 15th, we're going to make sure that all expenditure reports have been submitted from October 1st to December 31st. May 15th, we'll check that all expenditure reports have been turned in from January 1st to March 31st. And then August 15th, we'll check April 1st through June 30th, okay? So even if you don't do it monthly, the expectation is that if you start getting your funding on July 1st, this would apply to the new grant. So let's just say the October one. Some of you who had Cohort 16, this will apply to you. So from October 1st, so on February 15th, we're going to check to make sure that you've done all of your expenditure reports from October 1st to December 31st. If you have not, at that time, we will be reaching out and try to come up with a plan to help you be better prepared to submit your expenditure reports in a timely manner. But it does kind of have a red flag against you. It's like a check against you. It goes against your risk assessments. It goes against your risk level. And if it continues to occur over and over again, there is a chance that you could have your funding revoked for the year if you're not submitting these in on time, or it could do both. You could not qualify for future 21st century grants. Please understand it's not a matter of us trying to be mean or anything like that. It's just in the past, things have been allowed to be so lax that people have gotten used to submitting things in months and months and months late, okay? But the feds have very frequently asked us to be more careful about making sure that our subgrantees stay in compliance with the grant, okay? And one of those things is making sure that you're submitting your expenditure reports in on a monthly basis so that we can keep up with the exact amount of funds that we have at the state level. I didn't do a good job of that last year just because I was just barely keeping my head above water, learning all of the things. And by the time I realized that we were in a bad situation, the school year was already almost over. We were going into summer. By the time I realized that, from this past year, a majority of the funds hadn't been spent yet, and we were at risk of sending money back to the feds at the end of the year. We're still in that situation right now, and if I had done a better job of keeping up with it on a monthly basis, that wouldn't have happened. So this year, I've got things in place to help me keep up with it, and I'll be checking it on a monthly basis, and we will be reaching out to you guys if you fall behind. So again, please just know that we're going to stick to these dates. And by not sticking with them, it could potentially cause problems for your funding. Okay, we have a question about how long does it take for reimbursements to be processed. So CBOs take a little bit longer than LEAs, but for LEAs, it's actually pretty quick. As long as your numbers match up correctly, then I think it can be done like within a week or two. That the ES2 can be approved. Now, how long it takes for you to actually get a check from the comptroller's office, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not. Somebody may be able to put that into the chat who's been doing this for a while. That part I don't see. I just see whether it's approved or not, but I don't know how long it actually takes you guys to get the physical reimbursement or to get the money actually put into your accounts. But if anybody knows that information, please feel free to share in the chat. Now, for CBOs, it takes a little bit longer. Okay, sorry. For CBOs, it takes a little bit longer because we do review, in most cases, we do review all of the expenditures. And so that can take an hour, that can take an entire day or longer. It just depends. I don't know if Carla is on this afternoon, but she came on and talked about how it's super, well, we'll get to this in just a second, but the more organized you are when you turn in your expenditures, the faster we can get it processed. So if you turn in everything in an organized manner and everything matches the way it should, then it should be a pretty quick process. We then turn it over to accounting and tell them that we approve it. Then accounting looks at it, does what they need to do, and then they approve it. And then once accounting has approved it, I'm not exactly sure how long it takes to get the funding, but I don't think it's very long. As long as you have gone through the measures you're supposed to, making sure that your account is linked to Alabama Buys and all of that, we have access to drop those funds for you. Okay, so we will send out this presentation, but it does, on Friday's email, it does have links to these different forms for you to review. Okay, so Molly Suter said, let me stop for a second. So Molly put in the chat, thank you so much, Molly. There's CBO also, and it's usually around a month from the time of submission to check received. Sometimes longer if a correction needs to be made because the process starts over. So thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate that. So yeah, about a month. That's what I was thinking. But I'm glad that somebody verified that. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is the form that our specialists use to review your ES2s and all of the expenditures that go with it. If you have to submit those this is mainly for CBOs, but again, we may do this also for some LEAs every now and then. So there is a link to this form that you can look at to make sure that you are submitting everything that you need to submit with your ES2. And then once we've approved it, also accounting approves it too. So this is what the ES2 form looks like that goes to accounting. Now, another thing that Carla did point out in the last one that I didn't notice before is we should no longer have this gasoline or diesel, number 24 and 25, as part of this because we don't do gasoline and diesel anymore. That needs to be updated. Remember now, instead of claiming for gasoline and diesel, you'll claim for mileage instead, which would fall under one of these other areas or categories. But notice that the categories pretty much fall within the option codes and function, well, actually the function codes that are in EGAP. So basically, the way, I don't think Carla, are you on? Is Carla on? I don't think she is. So I'm just going to say what she said earlier, and she could speak up if she is here. So basically, she was saying the biggest thing is looking at these categories and making sure your amounts match up. So, hey, oh, she is here. Okay, go ahead and say what you said earlier, Carla. Thank you so much, Carla. So yeah, the more organized you are when you turn things in, the better. So I mentioned this last meeting. In the past, sometimes, especially the CBOs have gotten far behind. Right now, several of them actually are still playing catch up from the previous year, the year before last year. And so oftentimes the CBO will ask if they can typically you can only turn in one ES2 at a time. You have to turn in 1 month's ES2, it gets approved, you can turn in the next one. And that's typically the process. Now, we've had CBOs reach out and basically say, well, if you would let us turn in more than one at a time, we could get this done faster, we could get caught up faster. And I'll just let you guys know that I leave that up to your ALSDE specialist. That is up to them as to whether they can handle that or not, looking at multiple months at a time. And I'm not going to override that decision. If they feel like they can't look at multiple months at a time, then I'm not going to make them do it. However, I can say this, the more organized you are, the more likely they're going to be willing to do that for you. So if you do get behind and need to submit 2 at a time, if you're very organized with it, and like Carla said, you have like a sheet, a header sheet that says, okay, everything after this sheet is my purchase services information, and you have all that documentation. Then you have the next sheet, my materials and supplies, and you have all those invoices and receipts. Then being organized like that and everything adding up to be the numbers that you put into the sheet, that is going to really help determine whether they're going to be more willing to look at more than 1 month at a time. So just hopefully you won't get behind and it won't be an issue. We're going to try to stay on top of this, much better. But if that does happen, then that's typically the answer. Ask your specialist. If they say no, don't come to me and ask me to override what they said. I'm going to go by I'm going to do what they feel most comfortable with. So just understand that, please. Okay. So again, there's a link to this spreadsheet in the presentation. We'll make sure we get that sent out to you as well, so you have access to that. All right. Next, we're going to talk about inventory management. Feel free to put a question in the chat at any time. I'm just going to keep trucking along until we get finished, but I'll answer your questions as they pop up. I can see it on the other screen. So let's talk inventory. Okay, so this is the requirements for inventory. Equipment inventory forms are required for all equipment purchased with 21st Century funds other than consumables. Now, this came up at summer trading when we trained the new the new Cohort 25 summer. When we trained them, they didn't think they were going to have to do inventory because in their particular LEA, they had a rule about that they only keep inventory for items that cost more than a certain amount of money, like more than $500. I'm just going to throw that out there. Well, so they didn't think they would need to keep inventory at their sites because they weren't making any major expensive purchases. However, we had to let them know that with 21st Century, you do have to keep inventory of all items that are not consumables that are purchased with 21st Century funds, no matter what the cost is. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a room that is specifically going to be used by 21st Century programs, and you want to put like a little mini library in there. So you have some shelving and you purchase some books for the kids, some age appropriate books for the kids that they can check out or that they can read while they're at the 21st Century program. Well, those books may cost anywhere from $5 to $20 or more, but even that $5 book needs to be put onto the inventory. Okay, if it's an item that can be used over and over again and is not consumed by using it, then you would need to put it on the inventory. Now, if you're purchasing workbooks that the kids are going to write in and work in, maybe go home to the kids, of course, you would not need to include that because that would be considered a consumable. Art supplies would be considered consumables. But any kind of equipment that can be used over and over again and it's going to stay as part of the program needs to be included in inventory. Okay, so here's the guidelines for the forms that have to be completed. So inventory must be completed for each site. Okay, so if you have more than one site in your, if your LEA has more than one site, then you need to have multiple inventory forms. Those forms need to be housed at each site. Okay, so multiple sites require multiple forms and they can't be combined together. So I used this earlier, Elmore County. If Elmore County has 4 different 21st Century sites, then their program director couldn't keep inventory all in one place all together combined. There would need to be inventory at each of the 4 sites would have to be keeping up with their inventory. Also, you have to have a separate inventory form for each year of purchases. So by the time, if this right here, you're going into the first year of your first grant, by the time this grant is over, if everything goes according to plan, you should have 5 inventory sheets that at the end of the program, 1 for each year of the program that you purchased items. So you have inventory sheets per site, and then you have a separate inventory form for each year of the program. Okay. On that sheet, you need to include the serial number of the equipment, but not the property number from the district. So if your district requires for you to also label 21st century equipment with a property number, you don't need to use that as your documentation for 21st century. Technically, that equipment is not property of the school district. It's not property of that school. It's property of 21st century, right? And so that inventory should be tagged with the wording 21st century funds and the fiscal year that that item was purchased. Now, you could either put the fiscal year or the FAIN number. The FAIN number is actually required now, is a new requirement for federal programs. And so if you're monitored through federal programs, they're going to ask for the FAIN number. So if you want to go ahead and put that, then we would advise you to do that. The FAIN number is included in your grant award notifications. Those haven't come out to you yet, but they should be coming very soon. But what we're requiring right now is the fiscal year or the FAIN number, mainly because we could look, if we know the fiscal year, we can look up the FAIN number pretty easily. But just know, if you want to go ahead and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you could go ahead and put the FAIN number if you have access to that. You also, attached to these forms, you have to have written narratives that explain what your inventory process is, your equipment disposal process, and your loss prevention process. Okay, we talked about last week at Mega, if you guys were there, that there's certain procedures and processes that you have to have in writing, and this is one of those things. So if you don't have this in writing, most of you who work with an LEA probably already have these things in writing, because you can just use the LEA's processes, written processes. But if not, then you need to create these written processes, and they need to be attached to your inventory. So it doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can be pretty simple of what your inventory process is. Just understand that if your LEA's process is that we only keep inventory on items that are $500 or more, then you're going to need to adjust that to make it match the SDE and the federal requirements, which is pretty much you inventory all equipment that's not a consumable. You also need to have an equipment disposal process. So when I say disposal process, you should have something in writing that says what you do with equipment once it's no longer going to be used anymore. How do you determine whether something needs to be disposed? So it could be that after a certain number of years, you can dispose of computer equipment because it's not really considered usable anymore. It's out of date. It's obsolete. So you need to have a process for that. Maybe it still turns on, and maybe it will still add 2 + 2, but will it actually function as a working computer, right? Can you access the internet with it? Can you do the things that a good functioning computer can do? And once it gets to the point where those things don't work anymore, then you need to have a process for disposing of that. A process for what you're going to do if something breaks. Can you just throw it away? Do you have to keep it in a room for a certain amount of time? What happens? You also need to have a process, a loss prevention process. So this means, what are you going to do if something gets lost or stolen? Most LEAs require, as part of loss prevention, you to do a police report. So if a student takes home a computer or takes home a piece of equipment and then says they lost it or it was stolen, then they need to file, or somebody needs to file a police report and include that documentation that you did that as part of your loss prevention process. Do understand and know, though, if a student loses or breaks 21st century equipment, you can't charge the student for that equipment. And that's really any equipment that's purchased with federal funds. If a student loses or breaks it, you can't charge the student to replace that equipment. So don't make that part of your loss prevention process. You can't make them pay for it. Can you if you know that it was something that was intentional and it was done out of malice, could you make them not part of the program anymore? Absolutely, you can do that, but you can't make them buy it or repay for it or anything like that. Okay, so a question just popped up. What should we use in place of a serial number for small inventory items like books, clipboards, other supplies that don't have a serial number? If they don't have a serial number, I would assume that you would just leave that blank. Now, what you could do might be a wise thing to do. If it's a small item, you can number them and use that, but if it's not something with a serial number, then that part would not have to be completed. You would just put NA or, something like that. But typically, larger, your computers, laptops, iPads, PlayStations, stuff for any kind of electronic equipment typically is going to have a serial number of some sort, and you're going to use that. So again, the equipment inventory form is linked here in the presentation that you'll have access for that. So you can check that out. Yeah, okay, so Kathy mentioned books do have an ISBN number. So yeah, you're welcome to use that. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. So some items may have a number you can use to identify those items. If they're due, then try to use that. But like you said, clipboards, that may not have that. But, if you know you've got 20 clipboards, you can number them 1 through 20 and then put that in there. But again, if they have some sort of identifying number, then try to go ahead and use that. Okay, so this is what that form looks like. It has changed a little bit in this past year. I want to say this is maybe not the most up-to-date one because I think there's also something that is required by the feds about equipment maintenance. Oh no, it's not equipment maintenance. It's let me think about this. Condition of the equipment. That is another thing that has to be included. So I think there's an updated version of this form. We actually accidentally did a screenshot of the wrong one. But these forms have been sent out. We'll make sure that you guys have access to these. But you also have to report in addition to these columns, you have to report the condition of the item. So you could determine how you want to report condition. It could be, that you just say used condition, excellent condition, good condition. I would just come up with some sort of way, that was one of the other things that you're supposed to kind of have a written procedure for is how you determine the condition of things. And so, you could just say excellent, good, fine, poor, bad, whatever, however you want to put it, and then you would keep record of the condition of items as well as part of this document. Okay, so this is just another note saying everything has to be inventoried and the records must be maintained until the equipment is disposed of according to your equipment disposal process, regardless of the number of years a subgrantee has a 21st century grant. So you're supposed to continue to keep this inventory on a yearly basis as long as you have the 21st century grant. So as things break and get thrown away, you should be putting the date that it was disposed and the method. Was it thrown away? In some cases, it may be that you donate something as a disposal method. So for example, if you've got computers that you consider obsolete, maybe you could donate them to, the a robot club, or engineering club or something like that. There may be ways that you can donate some things, or that could potentially be a disposal method. It doesn't always have to be that you're just throwing it in a landfill. There could be other ways to dispose of things that are no longer of use for your program. That all should be written out in your procedures. Okay. Any other questions about inventory before we move on? All right, I'm going to continue to keep checking the chat. And I went over this last week, but just for those of you who may not have been at last week's, or maybe I rushed through it because I talked too much, please make sure that you do have a visible sign indicating that you have a 21st century program at your school. That sign could be as simple as a laminated piece of poster board that has the logo printed on it that you post to the door outside the building, or it could be a nice sign. You can use 21st century funds to have a sign made from a local sign company. Just make sure that it's reasonable and necessary. Of course, you don't want to use like 24 karat gold or brass, even brass may be too much. Or somebody asked if they could just put their 21st century on their LED sign, and they asked that last week, and I was like, sure, you can absolutely do that. You just can't use 21st century funds to buy the LED sign that says that your 21st century program. That would not be considered reasonable or necessary. But if your school already has an LED sign and it's just a matter of uploading the graphic, then that is fine. Now, if you do that, you might also want to consider having an actual physical sign near the door where parents would come to pick up their kids, just so that parents know where to come. If it's at the front door of the school, that may not be a big deal. It may not be a need, but if that door is like on a side door or in the back or something like that, it's somewhere other than the main door of the building, then you may need to put a 21st century sign outside of that door so that parents know where to come pick up their kids. Also, if you notice in this picture, I didn't even notice it until somebody pointed out that someone actually took the 21st century logo and altered it a little bit and included their name in the logo. And someone asked at last week's meeting if that's okay. I don't have a problem with this minor change to the logo, but it does need to mainly remain the normal 21st century logo. Typically, it would say Alabama here. They changed Alabama to Beyond the Bell. That's okay. I don't have a huge problem with that. As long as you're not just making major changes to the graphics and things like that, then that's not a huge deal. But if you can maintain the normal 21st century logo and just put the name of the program underneath it, that would probably be better. But little things like this are not that big of a deal. Also, if you have a designated 21st century classroom, you're welcome to have a sign made to put outside of it, but it's not a requirement. You just can do that if you want to. So we wanted to make sure we mentioned that. Okay, so also you need to make sure that you prepare to have both a staff orientation and a parent orientation at the beginning of the school year. Your staff orientation should happen very soon, preferably before your program starts. This is when you're going to go over all the rules and regulations of your program, make sure that all of your staff knows what they're supposed to do. So that should be happening in the next couple of weeks. There is a link to a staff orientation agenda if you want to view that, so you can just kind of see some of the topics that are typically discussed during staff orientation. There is a link to that in the presentation. When you get that, we encourage you to click on that and check that out. Excuse me. And then also you need to go ahead and plan a parent orientation night. This needs to happen towards the beginning of the school year. You don't have to do it immediately right at the beginning of the year. You could kind of maybe coordinate it along with back to school parent orientation that happens at the actual school if you wanted to. But it does need to happen fairly early in the program, just so that you can go over with parents what 21st century program is and what the expectations of the parents are. Talk to them about things like what happens if they need to come get their child early, what are the checkout procedures, things like that, safety, go over those types of things. So I'm not going to show those to you right now, but there are examples that you can refer to in the presentation. And then also just keep in mind that when you have these two meetings, you need to make sure you keep a copy of the agenda. You need to have a sign-in sheet for both meetings, both the parent and the staff meeting. Make the parent sign in when they get there so that you have that documentation that they attended. And also keep a flyer or whatever communication you used to let parents know about the meeting, of when it was going to take place and where it was going to be. So typically people will send out a flyer, may send it home with the kids, but also it could be a screenshot of where you've posted it on the school's website, or send it out in a remind, or whatever, however you let parents know about that meeting. You need to make sure you keep a copy of that, a visual of that you can submit to your TAs. And then also when it comes time for you to be monitored, that's also something that we ask for during compliance monitoring. Nobody's going to be compliance monitored this first year of the grant, so don't have to worry about that this year, but your TAs will ask for this documentation when they come to visit you. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Okay. There's some other example handbooks and forms. These are all required. Well, not all required. Most of them are required. So I've got some examples for you to refer to here that were kind of shared by other 21st century programs. So this first one is an update. So this one, I don't know if I can show you or not. Let me try. Since I'm recording this, it won't show up in the video, but the people who are here may be able to see it. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see this. All right. So this was shared to us from Lindsay Blevins, who's actually in the meeting today. This is something that she does, that she sends out, I guess, to her staff or to the site coordinators. So she's just, you don't have to do this. This is something that is above and beyond, but it's great. It's got dates and deadlines to remember for the staff. It's got updates for the week, program operations, lesson planning, talking about easy reports, communications, purchase orders, and then helpful links. And then she does a program spotlight of the week, which is great. So again, you don't have to do this, but this is something that we thought was great and wanted to share with you guys. Okay, then you have example staff handbook. Let me see if I can share that. Again, you're probably not going to be able to see this if you're in the recording, but those of you who are here today can see it, I think. Okay, so this one was from Carrollton City Schools. This is their staff handbook. From 22-23. There's links to these that you can access. Got a table of contents. Goes over all of the different things. And so I'm just going to go through the table of contents real quick. They've got an overview of the program. They talk about cost of things, snacks, transportation, holidays and early release, registration, program organization, where it talks about the different roles and duties of the program directors, site coordinators, and teachers. Also, it looks like they have some of the community partners in here. Program components, registration expectations, recruitment plan, all of these things that the staff needs to be aware of. Student discipline plan, student attendance and retention, bus discipline, student transportation, safety. So this includes all of the safety plans that are required, safety drills. It should include dates of when those safety drills are going to happen. And then it even goes into personnel, talks about hiring, observations and evaluations, staff code of conduct, all of that. She gives their sustainability plan, their program policies and procedures, and then there's some appendices. So again, there's a link to this that you can refer to it. We're not saying that this is the perfect staff handbook, but this is a really good one that you could check out and use. A lot of LEAs have staff handbooks already for their regular staff, and so it may be that you could just tweak that but here's an example of a really good one that we had access to, and they were okay with us sharing with you guys. Okay, then you've got an example parent handbook. Let me pull it up. Sorry. Okay, so this one's from Eclectic Middle School from Elmore County. They've got a nice little artwork that was created by one of their students. They talk about their program hours. They have a welcome letter from their program director. Talks about the program. Is it the right one for your family? So it talks about enrichment, that it's voluntary, that sort of thing. And then it goes over the goals for their family, policies and procedures. Talks about the goals and objectives that were in their RFA, which is very important. Academics. It talks about who that program is open to. So in this case, it was all 4th through 9th grade students who attend Eclectic Elementary School, Eclectic Middle School, and Eclectic High School. So they had a program that was all together. It just goes through all the different, it looks like it's in alphabetical order, which is great. What to do if there's bad weather, career education, code of conduct. Just a really good resource for you guys to look at. Talks about medication policies, family nights, field trips, parental agreements. I mean, it's just really, really good. So again, there's a link to this in the presentation that you can take this and look at it and tweak it to your own needs if you want to. There's also an example student application. So let me pull that one up. This one was shared to us from Skyland Elementary School. So they just go over what their grant was. This was back from 2020. Has just some brief information about the program, and then as you can see, it was submitted by Ms. Lindsay Blevins, and then it has the application itself. So a place to put the student name, teacher, grade level, parent contact information, additional contacts with permission to pick up student, and a place to sign. So this came up in the last meeting as to what is required of the student applications. So let me go over that just for a moment. One thing that was brought up was that it's recommended that you go ahead and put into the application any information you need to put the students into easy reports. So again, we will have another easy report training that will go over what those items are. A lot of you may already know what those items are. They may have been talked about last week in the easy report system, but you may want to go ahead and include that in the application so that you already have that information ahead of time. And then the other thing I just want to mention is you need to make sure that your application is equitable to all students that it applies to. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So one way that you can make sure you're being equitable is when you're thinking about private schools. So if you're serving a school that has a private school that is located, the actual private school is physically located within the attendance area of the schools that your 21st Century program is serving, then technically you are supposed to also reach out and send those applications to that private school to allow their students to participate in the 21st Century program as well. So as soon as you make the application available to the public school students, you need to make sure it's also available to the private school students. Now, technically, you're also supposed to allow like homeschool parents to participate as well, but we don't expect you to send those out to homeschool parents. But if somebody reaches out to you and asks if their child can participate and you have room for them, then you are supposed to allow that. Now, somebody asked in this morning's meeting, what if we have a huge number of kids apply, but we know that they're not going to come on a regular basis, and we don't want to let them into the program. We've got, maybe they have a history of applying for 21st Century, but then they only come like once a month or something to that effect. I mean, we don't want them to take up a student seat. Well, there's ways kind of around that. If you if your RFA, if your application said that your focus was going to be on a certain group of students, like for example, maybe your focus was going to be on kids who are struggling academically in math and reading, or maybe your focus, your need and your focus was to provide a safe place for kids who had issues with truancy and behavior issues, that if they didn't have 21st century, that typically these kids would go out into the community after school and cause problems, maybe cause physical damage to buildings, or get in trouble with the law for some reason. And that was a need that you needed to address. So if you have a specific need in a certain group of students that you want to have access to the program, you can put in place in your application specific criteria that you're looking for in order for people to apply. But you need to make that equitable, like anybody who meets that criteria can apply. And then you need to go ahead and be thinking about what are you going to do if you have too many people apply, more than what you think you can handle. You need to go ahead and have kind of a written procedure in place. Go ahead and think this through of how we're going to handle certain situations. So let's say that we feel like we can handle 100 kids, but no more than that. Are you going to make it a first come first serve basis? Are you gonna make it where you're gonna cater, or you're gonna like give priority to a certain group of students? So let's say you want to give priority to students who are failing or are not meeting benchmark requirements in math or reading. So is that going to be a requirement? If that's a requirement, it needs to be part of the application. It needs to be stated in the application that that's a requirement, or that those kids will get priority over those who are not struggling. Like, you need to be very detailed. You don't want anybody to ever come back to you and say, my kid was left out for an unfair reason, right? Or, you can't prioritize public school kids over private school kids. It has to be equitable across the board. So just make sure you're careful about that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask, and we will be happy to look at that. Okay, there's a question. Can we require the students to be potty trained, and if they do not have an aide that can work the after-school program? Okay, so that is a good question. Could potentially be a complicated question. So I would say if you're talking about young children, like kindergartners, pre-K, could you require that they be potty trained? I think that would be fine. Can you require, if it's a situation where it's more of a special needs issue, then technically, if that's the reasoning, then technically you can't deny them being part of the program for that reason. Now, if they don't personally have an aide that can work with the after-school program, then you would need to reach out to your special ed department and see if one can be found that can help with that sort of thing. You can use 21st century funds to hire aides for kids that have special needs. So just be careful. That's just one of those things to be careful. I would reach out to your special ed department and make sure that you're not violating any kind of rules and regulations around children with special needs, if that's the case. So that question has come up in the past. You can use 21st century funds to pay for that, but technically, special ed should find an aide to help that student and make it where they can participate in the program. So that is a conversation to have with your special ed department. And if you end up in a situation where special ed is not wanting to pay for it and you can't afford to pay for it, then please reach out to us and maybe we can kind of foster or facilitate that conversation and figure out what the best course of action is. But I do know that you can't deny a child with special needs access to your 21st century program because they have special needs, or because they aren't able to do certain things that other kids can do. I can say that. Hopefully I answered that question. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing this. Okay. Okay, good, Kathy. I'm glad I answered your question. Okay, and then there is a safety plan template that I have linked here. Let me pull it up really quickly. Here we go. Okay, so this is an actual template that was created for you guys. It has where you can, anything that's in red is where you would make it your own, basically. Or it could just be instructions. So, of course, right here you would put the name of your specific program, if it's for the summer or if it's for the academic year. You would probably have different safety plans for the school year versus the summer because it's a different situation. So if you are running both a school year program and a summer program, you do need to have a safety plan for both. And there's an introduction here. There's a place for you to put, there's just kind of like the other templates I've shown you guys. There's bullets that you can either include or not necessarily include depending on your particular program. But we tried to be helpful in providing the things that you would need to have in there. Okay, there's here a place for your safety plan. You are supposed to have it approved by various individuals. So you've got a place to put 21st Century Emergency Plan for the name of the school. It's been completed by whoever completed it and approved by whoever needs to approve it. So it could be your program director, it could be the principal of the school, it could be the superintendent, whoever would be the person in your LEA that can approve safety plans. And then you need to make sure you distribute that plan to various people within the school and have them sign for it. Make sure all 21st Century staff receive a copy and sign this page to reflect as documentation. Okay. You've got program contacts with their name and phone number. Last thing you ever want is to have an emergency situation happen in your school and nobody to know who to call and who to contact immediately. So of course they need to know the name of the principal, assistant principal, program director, site coordinator, and a phone number that they can reach them. Probably a cell phone number would be best if they're willing to share that with you. Who is the chain of command for that safety plan? So you would need to have somebody who's going to be in charge of directing emergency activity. So it could be in charge of a place to meet if there's a bomb threat, or where we're going to go if there's a tornado warning, how to exit the school. We're going to lead, how we're going to check the classrooms to make sure everybody has left the building for a fire drill, that sort of thing. And then you've got after dialing 911, the following persons will be contacted. Sorry, that's evidently a misspelling. In the order listed below, it should say in case of emergency in the order listed below. So you would have the chain of command of who needs to be contacted if there is an emergency. Make sure that gets fixed. Then also phone numbers for the local police department, fire department, EMS, alarm company, poison control center, all of these different things that somebody needs to have immediate access to if their emergency happens. Physical locations of things like first aid kits, a defibrillator, medical plans, the student emergency contact information, gas cutoff, water cutoff, fire extinguishers, fire alarms. You should have an emergency response team. Who's your first aid coordinator? Remember, you need to have at least 2 people on site that know CPR. Who are those people? That may need to be included on here. Facility and materials coordinator, student parent reunion coordinator. So who could you have, if you had to move the kids off site, who could you have that would be responsible for making sure that parents and students are reunited with appropriate people if if parents have to pick kids up from a site other than your 21st century site for whatever reason. Here's your staff that has that first aid training, other basic emergency information, what to do for kids that have special needs, so special medical, physical, or behavioral needs. So if you have a kid that, for example, is highly allergic to certain types of food or bees or something like that, you need to have kind of a plan in place for what will happen to take care of that child's medical emergency. It's just an example. Accountability, organization, and responsibilities. All of this is included here. So this is a great template for you to use to create your safety plan. Post-incident communication plan. I mean, it goes into great detail. Okay. Again, it has a place in here for you to put your safety drills. Severe weather response report. Lockdown drill response. That's what I couldn't remember earlier. I was trying to remember lockdown. You need to have that in place. Bus drill response. If you're providing transportation, you do need to have some sort of bus drills. So all of this is part of that plan, and you will have access to this in the presentation. Okay, any questions? All right, I'm going to keep going. Let's talk about lesson plans. Okay, so this is one of probably the least favorite things of that I've heard people complain about is lesson plans, but this is a requirement of the grant, is that for all the activities that you have with 21st Century, just like a teacher has to create lesson plans for her classroom during the day, your teachers need to create lesson plans for what you're doing with the students in the after-school program or the summer program. So your lesson plan, we have some templates that we can provide to you. None of them are perfect. They all, we don't have a specific lesson plan template that we require for you to use. But so you can use what we provide, or you can use your old lesson plan templates, but we do have specific components that it should include. Of course, it should have an overview and purpose. It should include Alabama education standards. What standards are you meeting by doing that activity? It should have RFA objectives, which again, we provided to you guys in last week's meeting, but if you need us to send you a copy of your RFA, we are happy to do that. Just reach out to your program specialist, your 21st Century ALSDE specialist. We can get you a copy of that, or your program director should be able to give you a copy as well. What materials and resources are going to be used, what prior knowledge you expect kids to have to do this activity, what kind of preparatory activity you're going to do in advance of this lesson plan, what assessment or verification you're going to use to see if the kids actually learned anything, what activities you're doing, any follow-up activities or reflection that you're going to do, and then of course the outcome of the activity or the evaluation of the activity, how you're going to evaluate what you did. This is one of the reasons, this is supposed to be done for all lessons. However, this is one of the things that I think is a great idea, or it's kind of I could use this as an example of why you might want to base your 21st Century program on project-based learning, because instead of creating this plan every day, you could do it, you could create it based on projects, right? So you could have most of the plan that would go from day to day to day, and you just might need to update the activities of what you're doing that day that kind of goes towards that overarching goal or that overarching project that you're doing with the kids to meet that activity. Just keep in mind that it's a good idea to have a lead teacher to kind of help your teachers create these lesson plans, because sometimes in some situations, not all teachers may be certified. You may have some people that they're qualified to teach a lesson, but they're not necessarily teachers. And so you might need someone who can help them develop these lesson plans. They may not have experience developing lesson plans, and that is a great thing to have your lead teachers help them do. So particularly for STEM, that's another one. In the past, it's always been said that you're required to reflect on at least 3 components taught within a lesson of STEM. So in other words, if you should include like science, technology, and engineering, or math, technology, and engineering, or math, science, and technology. Okay. Now, before I worked for federal programs, I actually worked for AMSTA, and I helped run the Science in Motion program, which was high school science. And so I know that you can do STEM activities and not necessarily meet all 3 requirements. But again, if you go back to that project-based learning, it could be if you have a overarching STEM goal, it could be on some days you're doing the science portion, while some days you're using technology, while some days you're touching on some engineering practices, while some days you're touching on the math behind the science or that comes with the science. And so I'm not as particular about you including all 3 parts every day, as long as in the general lesson, in order for you to call that general lesson STEM, you should be touching on science, technology, engineering, and math at some point during that lesson. Also, just throwing this out there, technology does not necessarily mean they have to use a computer or use some high-tech piece of equipment. This pen is technology, okay? This is a form of technology. So a tool that you use to complete a job is technology. So you can talk to your kids about that. You don't have to necessarily have high-tech equipment in order for you to be incorporating technology into your STEM lessons. Service learning, let's talk about that. So you need to have a lesson plan that goes with your service learning projects. We touched on this a little bit last week, but I just want to talk about that again. So you being in cohort 26, one of the negative things is that you had to go ahead and let us know what your service learning projects were going to be for this first year of your grant. When really what is supposed to happen is that you were supposed to have the students do investigations in their community or have them come up with or figure out what the needs of the community are and plan what the service learning project is going to be, right? So you really are supposed to talk to the kids and talk to them about the community they live in and what are the needs of the community. So one example I gave earlier is it could be that the kids know that when they go to the park that's a block from the school, it tends to be dirty. People tend to trash it. There's garbage. There's issues with it. The benches need to be painted. Maybe the equipment needs to be painted or something needs to be fixed. There's things that it's an issue. It's a problem. It's not necessarily a safe place for the community to go to, and nobody uses it anymore except for people who are maybe not doing what they should be doing. And so maybe that's something that the kids see as a need. So absolutely, you could plan a day to go, you could plan a course of activities or activities over a course of time to go and try to help clean up that park. Go paint the park benches, go pick up trash. Of course, you want to make sure you're being safe and you're using safety measures and you're buying gloves and doing all the things. You've got plenty of people helping and watching. But let the kids come up with what the need is with that service learning project. Obviously, when your site's RFA was written, y'all had to go ahead and come up with kind of a service learning project. If you want to change that, then you can do so. Just put in a request for that. But if you want to stick to what you said, then I would still, if I were you, I would try to come up with some ways to have student buy-in. So for example, if you said that you were going to take the students to visit the local nursing home, let the kids decide what they're going to do when they get to the nursing home. Are they going to read to the patients? Are they going to sing for them? Are they going to do an arts and crafts projects with the elderly? Are they, what is it they're going to do when they get there? Are they going to make them Valentine's cards and Christmas cards and things like that? So let the kids have the buy-in. Service learning is one of my very favorite parts of this whole program because, as you know, even adults tend to live in their own bubbles and sometimes tend to not think outside of their own life and their own experiences. And it can open up a world, it can open up the needs of their community. It can help kids realize that the world does not revolve around them, and they need to be active and involved members of their community, and that they can actually make a difference in their community. And so I love this part, and I highly recommend that you focus on this and you create a great lesson plan of what you want to see those kids learn when they're doing their service learning projects. Just as a reminder, you should have one in the beginning, like in the fall, one in the spring. You can do one during the summer too, like something quick and easy, but the requirements are definitely one in the first semester and one in the second semester. Okay, and then vendors, last thing about lesson plans. If you're paying somebody to come in and do an enrichment activity with your students, then you should be asking them to create a lesson plan and provide those lesson plans to you ahead of them coming so that you can review them and make sure that what they're doing is what your expectation is. That what they're doing is appropriate with the students that they're going to be working with, and it should be part of their contract. So again, remember, we're making sure now that our contracts are very detailed of what our expectations are of our vendors. And so one of those expectations should be that they are providing you lesson plans with what they're going to be doing with the students in advance, in time for you to look at it and make sure that what they're doing is appropriate. So please make sure that they are doing that part of the program. Okay, any questions about lesson plans? Okay, I'm going to keep on moving until I see something pop up, okay? All right, family engagement. Sorry, let me let somebody in here. Okay. Looks like you're sharing videos or animations. Do you want to include your computer audio while you're sharing? Oh gosh, that scares me. I guess so. Okay. All right, parent and family engagement activities. So these are going to increase parental involvement and family responsibility for their child's education. Your goals, objectives, and activities should reflect events and opportunities that encourage family engagement, such as, for example, student, family, and financial literacy. That is something that families could all, that both students, their families would benefit from is talking about financial literacy in some cases. Okay, we're going to talk more about different parent and family engagement activities in a little bit, but do know, we'll go ahead and say this now, that for family engagement, the requirements are that you do an orientation. We've already talked about that. And then you need to have at least 2 additional family engagement activities that occur during a school year. And if you're doing a summer program, then you need to do at least 1 family engagement activity during your summer program. Okay? This would be bringing in parents, doing a play, doing a STEM night, literacy nights. There's all different kinds of things you can do. We're going to look at some different options in a little bit. Also, when you do these family engagement opportunities, make sure that you're keeping documentation of them. So make sure that you have an agenda, that you have parents sign in when they come, and that you also keep a copy of the flyer or the advertisement that you've sent out to parents to let them know about that family engagement night or activity. It doesn't necessarily have to be at night. Okay. Okay, let's talk about schedules. So you may get some feedback from your ALSD specialist about your schedule needing to be more specific. Some people, when they did the RFA, did a fantastic job creating their schedules, and some didn't do so great. We would like to see something that looks a little bit more like this one. Now, this one that I'm showing is a very complicated schedule, but I'm going to go over it with you. This is for a summer program, so it's a little bit longer than what your typical schedule would be. But if you notice, it tells you the activities that students from kindergarten through fifth grade, will be participating in during their summer program each week. Okay? You should be able to do the same thing for an after-school program. You should know what, in general, those students are going to be doing at a certain time of the day, each day of the week, and should be able to provide that schedule to us. your TAs, when they come and visit, or your external evaluator, when they come and visit, they should be able to look at your schedule and say, okay, I know when I walk in this building at 3:15, the second graders are going to be doing this, and that's what they should be doing. Okay, so when your ALSD specialists reach out to you and ask you to provide something that's a little bit more detailed, this is sort of what we're looking for. It doesn't have to be this complicated because, again, this is a summer schedule that not only incorporates 6 different grades, but also incorporates Literacy Act in it as well, which makes it even more complicated. But I did want to go ahead and show you this one because I do want you to go ahead and understand, for those of you who are doing a summer program, that we highly encourage you to work with your Literacy Act counterparts or your math, I don't know if they call it Math Act, but the OMI, the funds that OMI provides for math summer camps as well. We encourage you to work with them to create one summer program. And so I just want to go ahead and go over this with you guys really quick so that you know that that's an option. Because really, you may start planning for the summer in the next several months. You shouldn't have to wait. You shouldn't really be waiting until 1 or 2 months before the summer to plan your summer activities. You should be planning them, starting even maybe before Christmas, before the new year. So I just wanted to throw this out there. But either way, you should have a more detailed schedule. So let's look at this one. This is for a summer program, Appalachian School. Now they did have a very heavy focus on math and English, but they have other activities incorporated in there as well. So let's just look at this. So we're going to focus on kindergarten, and notice that they didn't blend funds, they braided funds, so they would offer one summer program to both the kids that have to participate as part of the Literacy Act and other 21st century students. But the kids who have to participate in the Literacy Act were also considered 21st century students because they did both. They did both Literacy Act activities and they did fun enrichment activities as part of the 21st century program. And this is what that looked like, okay? So from 7:30 to 8:15 in the morning, all the kids, as you see here, from kindergarten to 5th grade, they all had drop-off arrival, breakfast, morning announcements, and character education occurring during that time. Okay, so all the kids were probably in the lunchroom together, getting their breakfast, having the morning announcements, and doing some kind of brief character education activity. Okay. Then in kindergarten, from 8:15 to 9:45, the kindergartners were doing whole group reading. All the kindergartners, whether they were Literacy Act kids or the regular 21st century. So they participated in whole group reading activities. Now, if you notice, the first graders during that time, it's broken up into 2 time slots because the first graders, they did reading whole group for the first half, and then they did library or literacy enrichment the second half, okay? Different schedules, different activities for the first graders versus the kindergartners. Okay, then in the next block, we're kind of focusing on kindergarten here. In the next block, from 9:45 to 10:30, the kindergartners participated in some sort of library or literacy enrichment. What I feel like they mean by this is they did some sort of fun activity. So maybe they went to the library and picked out books, but maybe they also did something like readers theater or some other fun literacy activity outside of just reading as a whole group together. Okay, they incorporated literacy into a fun enrichment activity. Then notice from 10:30 to 11:15, they split. The kids who have to participate as part of the Literacy Act went to one place and did their intensive literacy intervention lessons with that certified Literacy Act teacher, while the other 21st century kids went to another place and just did reading or small group or literacy enrichment in another place. Maybe not to the extent or the intensity of what the Literacy Act kids were getting. Now, they still did reading, It could be during this time, these kids go and do some other kind of enrichment, fun activity, something, okay? But they split the kids apart at this point. Then they brought them all back together to have lunch from 11:15 to 11:45, all the kids, okay? Then in the next block, you notice from 11:45 to 12:15, they do STEM activities or art enrichment, and they have the kindergartners and first graders together for this. So it's probably on some days they do STEAM activities and some days they do art. So maybe they have robotics on one day, or maybe they do art projects on another day. They've left that open. It is known they're going to be doing one or the other during that time block, but it's not specific as to what exactly they're going to be doing to that time block. You just know it's either going to be STEAM or it's going to be art enrichment. Okay, then from 12:15 all the way to 1:15, both kindergartners and first graders are going to be doing some sort of math activities, but not together. They're going to do it separately because, of course, kindergartners are going to do math at a different level than first grade. Then again, they split the kindergartners up again, and you've got some, they're going to go and do the more intensive pull out vocabulary or writing lesson with those Literacy Act teachers, while the regular 21st century kids go and do another, they also do vocabulary or writing with another teacher, maybe not on such an intense level. Okay. Then they come back together from 1:45 to 2:15 and they do their civic responsibility or service learning projects. That's when they work on that. And they work on it together with the first graders. And then from 2:15 to 2:45, they do some sort of holistic health activity, which they're saying is usually physical activity. So in other words, they're going outside and playing, they're doing some sort of physical activity during that time period, and then they dismiss the kids at 3 o'clock. Now, this is very detailed. Even though they don't go into details about the exact activities that are being done, you know the type of activity that's being done for any grade level at any time during the week or during those program hours. Now, I would love to see more enrichment, more outside of the box enrichment incorporated in here. Maybe cut back a little bit on the literacy and the reading. Not to saying that, I mean, literacy and reading is great. You should incorporate as much of that as what's needed. But I also would love to see more fun activities because that would be good for making the kids want to come. But this is just an example that you can use, but this is the type of thing that we're looking for when we ask you to be more specific in your program schedules. Okay, any questions about this? And if you ever, if you start planning for the summer and you need us to help you with that planning and help you understand how to braid your 21st century funds with ARI funds or OMI funds, Office of Math Improvement funds, we are happy to help you work through that. This is an example here, but there's so many other ways you can do it as well. And so we are happy to help facilitate that conversation if you need to. I think it's worked really great in some places. Some places could use some work. I've heard feedback from a couple places that they might go back to having separate camps. You have to do what's best for your sites. I really wish that you could try to combine the two again, maybe try something different, because I just feel like, from what I've heard in the past, the feedback has just been that when you've got two separate camps running at the school at the same time, it creates all kinds of issues. You've got issues in inequity of what the teachers are being paid. You have issues in finding teachers to work both programs. You have issues with the kids that are participating in the literacy activities, wanting to do the fun stuff that the 21st century kids are getting to do, wanting to participate in the field trips and things like that. So if you can find ways to combine the two together, that's really the best way to go. If you can figure out how to do it. It may take a few years to get it right? But just because it's not super successful one year doesn't mean that you can't make some adjustments and make it successful the next. Okay. Next, we're going to touch a little bit on compliance monitoring. Again, we are not going to do any compliance monitoring this year. If we do anybody, it may be cohort 17 if they did not do a good job in their compliance monitoring from this past year. I've still got to close out those. We may do some compliance monitoring for some of them, but for everybody that's in this meeting, you should not have any compliance monitoring in the first year of your grant. So, but what you will have to do though is a self-risk assessment. This is a program requirement from the feds. Everybody has to do a self-risk assessment. So basically, we're going to send you a series of questions and you will rate yourself based on the answer that is correct for your site. Now, people tend to rate themselves higher than they really should. So we do get those back. We look at what you responded and what your ratings are, and we have a meeting that is us. We bring in TPI, we bring in all the TAs. It may be even a good idea to bring in some of the external evaluators to go over what you said, and sometimes we adjust scores if what you said, if your score doesn't match what we've seen in practice. Like if you had to rank yourself between a 1 and 5, with 5 being the highest, and you gave yourself a 5, but every opportunity that we've seen when it comes to that particular question, we've seen continuous compliance issues and you're not doing the right thing, we might lower your score down to, a lower score to better reflect what we have seen. But what we do with these is we score them and we give you a risk level based on your self-risk assessment. Now this year, all that risk level will do is let us know that we may need to provide you with more technical assistance. So if this is the first year you've been in the program and your risk level is high or medium, then we may ask your TAs to go out and visit you more often, or we at the State Department may make time to come out and visit you some, or just may put time on our calendar to reach out to you on a monthly basis, or maybe we may try to get you connected with a site coordinator or a program director who's been doing this for a long time that could mentor you. It just lets us know that you might need some extra attention. You might need some extra help because you're still learning, and we totally expect that to happen. Like, we don't expect anybody to hit the ground running in this program and be perfect at it in their first year or even their 4th or 5th year. Everybody should be constantly learning new things and continuously improving their programs. But this also lets us know what areas we need to address and we need to provide you with some technical assistance on. So typically on years when you're not being monitored, that's the only thing that we use the self-risk assessment for. Now on years when you are being monitored, it actually can affect you a little bit more because typically we base our compliance monitoring off of your risk level. Again, it's a combination of what you ranked yourself and what we rank you. So you may not feel like you're high risk, but we may feel like you're high risk. And so it could come out that you end up being medium risk, or maybe you fall into the high risk category. If that happens during a compliance monitoring year, then typically we ask for you to submit more documentation. So the higher risk you are, the more documentation we ask for. The lower risk you are, the less documentation we ask for. So that's the only way that really affects the work that you do. Now, I had someone last week ask if I could share the compliance monitoring tool with you guys, and I just basically said no. And the reason why is because the compliance monitoring tool that we currently use is going to be completely revamped. I'm going to change and redo the whole thing over the next year. Because we were asking for evidence, we were asking for you guys to turn things in that aren't even program requirements, and so I don't even know why we were asking for them. So some people could turn it in and some couldn't, and to me that's not very fair. What needs to be in the compliance is only things that are required by the program, and I feel like there needs to be a bigger focus. There's just certain areas that we should focus on more that have not been focused on in the past, and things that we focused on heavily in the past that weren't even program requirements. So plan to, over the next year, completely redo the compliance monitoring tool. And And just to let you know when you'll be monitored. So this is a 5-year grant. You may or may not know the LEAs are monitored on a 5-year rotation, 5-year basis, okay? So we're going to try to monitor people in the same year that they're typically monitored by federal programs, by special ed, by all the other departments here at the State Department. So when your LEA is monitored, that's when your 21st Century program will be monitored, unless your LEA is supposed to be monitored in this first year. So if your program is supposed to be monitored, if your LEA or the LEA that you serve, if you're a CBO, is supposed to be go through compliance monitoring this coming school year, then we won't do your monitoring this year. We'll push it to either the next year or just one of the other years. It just depends on how many need to be pushed to another year. But typically, in most cases, you'll be monitored in the year that your LEA is monitored. So, if your LEA was monitored this past year, you're probably not going to be monitored until year 5. Okay, so you can kind of guess when you're going to be monitored based on previous monitoring schedules. Okay, but that's how we plan to roll with your 21st Century monitoring. We want to do it at the same time as your other programs are monitored for the LEA. And again, if you're a CBO, then it would be during the time that the LEA you serve is monitored. Okay, so you might want to reach out to the LEA that you work with and ask them when was the last time that they went through compliance monitoring, okay, or when is the next time they're going to go through, which usually they don't know. They kind of may know that it's coming like in the next year or two, but we don't put out schedules like way far in advance. Typically, you're only monitored one time, but I do need to say this. If you have a history of being non-compliant, it is possible that we can monitor you more than once. If you continue to be high risk year from year to year, then it is a possibility that you could have to go through compliance monitoring more than one time, especially if the year you go through compliance monitoring, you don't actually submit the documentation that you're supposed to submit. Then yeah, definitely, if you're still part of the program, if we haven't revoked your funding, then you'll probably have to go through the compliance monitoring again the next year. So please take it seriously and make sure that you do what you're supposed to do. Your ALSDE specialists and your TAs will help you through it. Just make sure that you're keeping the documentation that you're supposed to keep, and that you're ready for that monitoring when the time comes. We will do training. We will walk you through what needs to be done, but there is a lot of document that when you know that monitoring is going to take place, there is a lot of documentation that you need to keep up with. Okay, so here's some of the documentation that we ask for during monitoring, just to let you know. So we ask to see lesson plans and student work samples. We want to see your handbooks, family engagement activities. We want to see that you did the orientation. We want that documentation I mentioned to show that you did the orientation for staff and parents. We want to see your schedules, your external evaluation reports, your safety drills, your PARs, your purchase orders and invoices. Those are all some things that we will ask for during monitoring. These things should not change. We will continue to ask for these things. Okay. That's all we're going to talk about for compliance monitoring for now. When that time comes, we start doing it, we will do much more intensive training. This next slide just has a variety of different resources that may help you as you plan for your 21st Century program. We've got links here to the Alabama Expanded Learning Alliance, our website, the U.S. Department of Education's 21st Century website, the Wallace Foundation, the ALSD Office of Extended Learning. That is a brand new office. I think it's now been around for a year. I know it's been around for at least a year, maybe 2 now. That's ran by Jeff Norris, and so we often meet with them. It's really any kind of extended learning or out of school time. They've had a big focus on summer programming, but they're also about to start focusing more on after school programs, so that's great. The National Summer Learning Association, and then AMSTA has a lot of hands-on activities that you can do with your kids on their website as well. Okay, so I want to just touch on what the Truman Pierce Institute does, what their roles are. I've had a bunch of questions. I think there's been some confusion because Erica sends out the emails, who's over the program, who's not, who do I call, who am I supposed to reach out to if I have questions about this or that. And so I just wanted to go over that with you guys really quickly. I'm not going to go into great detail about Easy Reports. I'm going to let them do that probably at the next training. But I do want to make you aware of what TPI does. So we actually contract with TPI. As you know, running the 21st Century program is very extensive. There's a lot of work involved in it. And so the State Department contracts with TPI to help us meet some of those program goals and needs. And so we contract with them to help us with some of the work that it's just too much for us to do with the State Department level. And we now have myself and 3 others, but at one time there was really only 1 admin and 2 specialists that worked for 21st Century, and it was just too much work for them to do. And so they contracted some of that work with TPI. So these are the people that work for TPI that you'll hear from the most. You've got Dr. Jason Bryant, who is the director of Truman Pierce Institute. You'll see him at some of, like he was at Mega this past week. You'll see him at some trainings. But you'll mostly hear from Erica or one of the 2 Lindas. Erica Rucker is the TPI 21st Century Program Coordinator, so she kind of coordinates the work that they do for us. She's over Easy Reports, external evaluations, mid-year reports, and final reports. So most of the work that they do for us is either revolves around Easy Reports or the external evaluator work. They also help us with like hiring our peer reviewers whenever we do a new grant and things like that. But that's their main duties. So if you have questions about Easy Reports or external evaluators, the best people for you to reach out to would be TPI, whether it's Erica or one of the 2 Lindas. We just call them the Lindas. But you got Linda Dean. Linda Dean mainly works with Easy Reports. She helps with attendance, surveys, and grades in Easy Reports. And then Linda Williams' focus is she also does some work with Easy Reports, but her main focus also is the external evaluation, the mid-year reports, and the final reports. So she's like she's the one who looks over your external reports or the reports that are submitted by your external evaluators and lets you know if they meet the requirements or don't. That's Linda Williams' main focus. But again, if you have questions about Easy Reports or your external evaluator, you should reach out to TPI. If you have other questions about other program, like especially when it has to do with the financials and things like that, then your ALSDE specialist is the more appropriate person to reach out to. If you're asking about program requirements and things like that, then you could reach out to us. Now, I'm not to say that we won't bring in Erica or one of the Lindas to help answer those questions, because they have been with the 21st Century program. They've helped with the 21st Century program for several years. Erica used to be a program director for a CBO herself, and so she's very knowledgeable. And so we may bring them in to help answer questions. We've lost all of our people that were with the State Department that helped with the program. We just recently lost Alicia. She was our last one, and so we're all still learning ourselves. And so not to say that they can't answer your questions, but typically we would like for you to reach out to us. The weekly email that goes out, Erica's great about typing it up, and then she sends it to me. I add in a lot of the new stuff, especially anything from any kind of new rules or regulations or information. I add all that in and then send it back to her, and then she sends that out. So, so just letting you know that, she's great about reminding me about that email and helping us put that together. But it is from both TPI and the State Department, so just want to make that clear. I think there's a lot of confusion sometimes with that. Okay, a question just popped up. Would you recommend site coordinators to attend a national conference? Yeah, if you have the funding to do so, I am perfectly fine with that. But I will say this, we're going to talk about PD in a minute, but since you already brought it up, I would definitely, well, actually, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think it's a great idea to go to a national conference if the funding permits it. Um, just remember that for program directors and site coordinators, your professional development is now going to fall under your administrative costs. So, so you may be limited on that a little bit of how much money you have to spend on things like that. So just keep that in mind. Typically, your PD funds, your 5% cap really goes towards your staff PD. But if that becomes an issue, please don't hesitate to reach out. We may can reconsider that, but we're just trying to fall in line with other federal programs in the way that admin costs are done with them. But yeah, if you have the funding to do so, then I'm fine with them going to a national conference. National conferences often give you lots of great ideas of things that you can do, ways to think outside the box, ways to make your program above and beyond what it currently is. And so if you have the funding to do so, I'm more than happy for you to send your site coordinators to one of those and your program directors. That is another thing that Erica and the Lindas are very well knowledgeable about are the different national conferences. They go to a lot of those. And so if you're not sure which one to send them to, you might want to reach out to them and get their advice on which ones would be good. The best one I've been to was actually ran by the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, but they didn't have it this past summer. They had it the very first summer I took the job, and it was amazing. And then they didn't have it this past summer. So hopefully they'll bring that back because it was really, really good. But there's some other ones out there that are very, very good as well. So they could help you out with picking a good one for your staff to go to. Okay, I'm just going to touch on easy reports. I am definitely not the expert on easy reports. We leave that to TPI to handle most of the time. So, but I'm going to touch on it just a little bit. And then again, we'll have Erica probably next week's training. If Erica's available, we'll have her go into more detail about what's expected with easy reports next week during that training. If we don't do it next week, then we'll reschedule it for another time and give you guys plenty of time to be prepared for that. To log into, hopefully you guys went to the easy reports training this past week and that was very beneficial to you. Everybody was supposed to come on Thursday and go to half a day of easy reports training and then half a day of ALSDE training. We also had another separate training on Friday that was optional. Hopefully some of you took advantage of that where they would work with you one-on-one to get your sites set up, to get your activities created and even possibly some students entered in. So I hope you guys took advantage of that. I was one of the coordinators of the conference, so I didn't get to check in and go into those presentations like I wanted to because I was busy doing other stuff with the conference. But I heard that there were some people in there, and so hopefully that was very useful to you guys. So back to this, easy reports. Your username is your email address and a password will be sent to you. It should have already been sent to you, I believe. If not, if you haven't gotten that email yet, or if you're a brand new site coordinator that has just recently been hired on, then contact TPI and they can get you set up in the system. There are two entry levels. You have the grantee interface, which would be appropriate for program directors. Basically, it gives you access. It should be sub-grantee, really. ALSDE is the grantee. You guys are sub-grantees, but access to sub-grantee and site interfaces. So a program director should be able to access easy reports for all of the sites that they're over. Then you have the site interface or site coordinator level, which basically, sorry that I'm in front of this, my little bubble here, but you have access to the site level interface. In other words, a site coordinator will only have access to their particular site's easy report data. Okay, they wouldn't have access to the other sites within their LEA. Then there's users and roles. So user roles, these are the different user roles. Okay, Okay, so you have grantee admin full, which means you have access to grantee and site interface items and can do all things within those programs. Then you have grantee user access, grantee user. That means you have access to almost all of the grantee and site interface items, maybe not everything, but most things. Then there's site admin full, which has access to site interface items. And then we're going to talk about PD in just a little bit, so we'll get to that in just a minute, okay? I see questions keep popping up about PD. We are going to get to that, I promise. Okay, so then you've got site user, access to some of the site interface items. If you need to change your user access or your role, then you can contact either your grantee administrator, the person who has this level access, or you can contact TPI. TPI has access to all of them. And then there's some instructions here that I'm not necessarily going to go over because I think there's supposed to be arrows here of how to make somebody a new user. Okay, but again, Erica will go over this when she goes over this training. I kind of stole some of these slides from one of her presentations from the past. All right, easy report responsibilities. So what is the responsibility of the program director? So program directors should add in their program dates. You should be adding in the start date and end dates for all of your sites and link your day school to those sites. So for each site should have at least one day school linked to it. When I say day school, I mean like the actual school that the students go to during the day that your 21st Century program is serving. The program director is also going to add regular activities, and these are instructions on how to do that. Okay. They're going to add special events for field trips and parent activities. They may add holidays, and they can add additional users as needed. Okay, so those are the roles of the program director. Site coordinator is going to do a lot more in Easy Reports. Okay, they are going to complete setup options. They're responsible for program attendance. They enable live program attendance. Okay, they're going to add staff members. They're going to add activity sessions, and they're going to add students. Okay. Also, let me go back. Oh, well, I can't go back. Dang it. I don't know why it won't let me go back. Okay. Okay, now I have to remember what that slide said. Other things that the site coordinator does is making sure that daily attendance is being put in for all of the students. Okay, I think that's the main thing that you need to keep in mind is just making sure that daily attendance is being reported. Okay, so that's it. That's all I'm going to touch on for Easy Reports, really, because I am not the expert on that. I will leave more details about Easy Reports to the experts. Now, some of this actually came from an Easy Reports slide, so I may touch on Easy Reports from this point forward, but most of the rest of this information is not going to be specific to Easy Reports. Okay, let's talk about external evaluators. Again, your go-to for help with external evaluations is going to be TPI. If you don't have an external evaluator yet, there is a list of external evaluators they have of recommended external evaluators. You do not have to use someone that's on that list, but if you use someone that is not on that list, you do need to reach out to Erica or one of the Lindas and just make sure that the person you are using is not on what I like to call the blacklist. I don't know if that's what TPI calls it, but that's what I call it, the blacklist. We will put external evaluators kind of on what I call a blacklist if we see that they're not doing what they're supposed to do or they haven't done what they're supposed to do in the past. It could be that their reports are not very well written, that they don't include data that they're supposed to include, that they don't ever submit things on time. We actually have some evaluators who have gotten paid and never produced the final reports. And so if that happens to you, please make sure you let Erica or one of her staff know that at TPI so that person can be added to the blacklist. Because you're paying these external evaluators a good bit of money. and you want to make sure that you have a good product as a result to that good money that you're paying them. So please make sure you're doing that. All programs, all sites have to participate in an external evaluation. They assess your program implementation and outcomes. They do use findings to guide improvements and meet GEPRA goals. Please note that if your external evaluator is a retired teacher, you do need to be using the correct object code in EGAP for a retired teacher, because even if that program is operating under an LLC, I don't know if I can move this bubble. No. Oh, I gotta stop touching things. Even if the program operates under an even if that person has their own LLC, they're still a retired teacher from the Alabama retirement system, and if they're getting paid money by one of our local education agencies, then that goes against that sum of money that they can make after retirement from local LEAs. Now, if it's a CBO, maybe different situation. But if you're an LEA and you're paying a retired teacher to be your external evaluator, I don't know what the object code is off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I can look it up if you need me to. But your CSFO will know what it is. But you need to use that object code to show that they are a retired teacher, so that so that it is reported to the retirement system that they are getting income from a local education agency. Sorry, I've been doing a lot of talking today. My voice is getting very tired. Okay, let's talk a little bit about NOIS training, National Institute on Out-of-School Time training. This is the training that is required of all external evaluators. This training is free to all 21st Century subgrantees and external evaluators. The training is required for our external evaluators, but it's optional for the subgrantees. But you will be sent a link to the NIOS training so that you can go through it if you want to. It's very simple. It's not hard to do, but at least if you go through it, you'll know what your external evaluators are going to be evaluating when they come, what they're going to be looking for when they come to your site to do their site visits. So again, it's optional. You don't have to do it, but it is available to you to go through that training if you would like to. When they come and do their observation, they have to do one per semester. So they need to do one in the fall, one in the spring, and if you're having a summer program, they would do one in the summer. They do go through that NIOS observation training. That's mandatory for them, and they use the observation tool that's provided from that training. Once they have done their observation, that observation must be signed by both the site coordinator and program director and the external evaluator. And then those observations, once they've been signed, they're supposed to be uploaded by the site coordinator or program director into Cognia. Now, Cognia is what we currently assume we will use it in the future, what we use for our compliance monitoring. You do not necessarily have to do that this year, but also I believe in our timeline that we gave you guys last week at Mega, there is a time for you to submit that information, I think, I may be wrong about that, to your TAs or to TPI, one or the other. I may be wrong about that. I may be just thinking about the mid-year report. But during a compliance monitoring year, you would submit those observations into Cognia. Okay, haven't gotten to program. Okay, so far the only question I see that I haven't addressed yet is about professional development, and we're going to get to that in just a little bit. So bear with me for just a little bit longer. Let's talk a little bit about GEPRA, which you've heard me refer to several times, but I haven't really talked about what it actually is. So GEPRA stands for the Government Performance and Results Act. Okay, it doesn't just apply to 21st Century; it applies to some other programs too. But for us, let's talk about what it entails. Okay, basically, it's the reporting required. It requires federal programs to demonstrate performance outcomes. I do want to say really quickly that I was out yesterday. So we got our GAN, our grant award notification from the feds yesterday. It dropped yesterday. I have not had a chance to go in and actually look at it yet, but I did see some comments from some other state directors that there's some new state reporting requirements, and so this may change. I just wanted to throw that out there. But as soon as this meeting is over today, that's like the first thing on my agenda to just go pull that in and read it and see what these new requirements are going to be. So just wanted to throw that out there. I didn't say it during this morning's meeting because I didn't see that until lunchtime when I was trying to catch up on emails. But I'll let you know what that is as soon as I find out what these new requirements might be. Okay, so anyway, for 21st century programs, GEPRA data tracks student progress in academics, grade point averages, school day attendance, behavior, and student engagement in learning. Okay, so that is the focus of GEPRA. All right, so what does this look like? Okay, doesn't do all of them for everybody. It depends on the grades. So first indicator is academic achievement. They look at grades 4 through 8, and they ask that we report reading and language arts state assessments and math state assessments. Now, let me say this. We pull most of this data for you from PowerSchool. And if you do what you're supposed to do, which is make sure that all of your 21st century students are marked as 21st century in PowerSchool, then this work on you is very limited, okay? It's only when you forget to go and mark those kids as 21st century and we don't pull their data that you have to go back and manually enter a lot of data, which is a big, giant pain, okay? I had to, unfortunately, ask a lot of sites to do that this past year, and they were not very happy with me. But please understand, this is something I have to sign that goes to the feds, and I am not signing something and saying that it's accurate unless I know I've done everything in my power to make sure that what has been recorded is complete and accurate to the best of my knowledge. And so we had to ask some sites to do some things this past year that they weren't too thrilled about, but hopefully they learned a lesson, and now they will make sure that all their students are marked as 21st century. Okay? The next thing is grade point average. This one gets a little difficult because in Alabama, we don't always report grade point average for grades 7 and 8. So if you see, we're supposed to report reading and language arts and math grade point averages. And we're supposed to report whether there was an improvement from one year to the next when the child was in the 21st century program. Well, we can do that for 10 and 11, 10 through 12 fairly easily, but then sometimes even that's a little hard. But for grades 7 through 8, that's not so easy to do because we don't always report GPAs. So what we do for them instead is we pull the grades, the reading and language arts and math grades for those students in grades 7 through 8. Understand we have to pull the previous year's data and the current year's data. So it could be that we're pulling their 6th grade data and comparing it to their 7th grade. So really they may kind of go outside of this grouping. It's really going to be pulled from grade 6 all the way up to 12 because for 10th grade we're going to have to pull 9th grade data to compare the previous year to the current year. So really it's just going to be all secondary data is going to be pulled, and then we actually kind of have PowerSchool let us know if there is an improvement in the data. So especially for those, I think we actually do it across the board. We don't just do it for 7th and 8th, we do it for all the way across the board. So instead of reporting an improvement in GPA, we report was there an improvement in the grades for reading, language arts, and math from one year to the next. And so basically it's reported as either there was improvement, there was no improvement, or there was the opposite of improvement. There was actually the grades got worse. That's what we report. So if you had to go in and enter that manually, then we asked you to look at that did they improve? It was like, if they improved, they got a 1. If they didn't get approved, it was a 0. If they actually got worse, then it would be like a -1. Okay, that's kind of the way we do that. All right, the next thing that's pulled for all grades is school day attendance. Remember, one of the big priorities of this grant is to increase student attendance at school. The theory is if kids are excited about coming to their after-school program and they know they've got to come to school to participate in the after-school program, they'll come to school more frequently and there'll be less absences. And that's the goal, right? So that's another reason why we want to make sure that you're incorporating lots of fun activities into your after-school program and not making it boring and not making it just more time when all they're doing is sitting and getting more instruction. We want to make sure there's fun things for them to do so they want to come to your after-school program, which means they have to come to school in order to participate in after school. So we want to see an increase in school day attendance. And so we pull that from PowerSchool. Same thing with behavior. Now, behavior is another one of those things that sometimes we have to justify because there may not be any data for, because we have some LEAs that don't have in-school suspension. That's not an option. They either, I don't know, they just don't do in-school suspensions. They do out-of-school suspensions or some other form of punishment, but in-school suspension is not one of them. And so in that case, we just have to report there's no data for those schools, and then have to write a justification at the end saying why there's no data. In our LEA, we don't do in-school suspension. And that's basically what that justification has to be. And then finally, for grades 1 through 5, we have to send out teacher surveys to those students, teachers, and those surveys, they are in Easy Reports. You can send them to the teachers through the Easy Report system, and it's just a few questions that ask about the student engagement and learning. So did participating in 21st Century cause the student to be more engaged in their learning during the school day? This is another one that has like a little bit of iffiness to it because we also have to do it for summer programs, and there's really no way to report that because it's a summer program. We can't say whether participating in the summer program actually increased student engagement during the regular school day, because there isn't a regular school day during that time. So we just send the survey to the 21st Century teachers that work with the kids during the summer and just ask them, we basically ask them, did their engagement in learning get better from the beginning of the summer to the end of the summer? That's really all we know to do. And then I do write a justification for that as well, and explain that that's how we do that. Okay. All right. Oh, what the heck? Okay, I don't know what just happened. I don't know how to go back. Okay. Well, we're skipping a slide. I think it was just a bunch of different activities that you can do with your students and that would go into Easy Report. So again, that will be touched on by Erica when she does her training next week. What I wanted to say here, only reason why I left this slide in the presentation is I wanted to address that last bullet. When you go into Easy Reports and you create your activities, you can create an activity for meals and snacks, okay? One of the Lindas chimed in at the last meeting, this morning's meeting, and basically said, yes, it's created as an activity, but it's created as other, and it's not really counted as an activity, as a 21st activity in our reporting. It's just a way to fill that slot of time, because you don't ever want to show, when you put your activities into Easy Reports, from the way it's been explained to me, when you put your activities in Easy Reports, you want each activity to be back to back to back. You don't even want 5 minutes of time to lack between activities, because then it shows that you're not meeting your full program hours, okay? So there is an activity there for you to serve the kids a snack or a meal. But please know that that does not count as a 21st Century activity. The reason why I wanted to address this is I heard some some feedback from us. I think this was mainly for a summer program, but it could happen during the school as well, where there was a high school from this past summer. I haven't addressed it with the school yet, so if you're here, I don't even know which school it is off the top of my head, so I may be talking, it may be one of you, it may not be. But there was a high school that basically was counting kids as being 21st century, and all they were doing during that summer program was coming in, eating breakfast, and then leaving and going to participate in sports. So they would come in and eat breakfast with the 21st century program, and then they were going with the football program or track and field or whatever and working out with the football players, and that was it. And they were counting those kids as 21st century. That is absolutely not acceptable. Now, I think they said the kids were coming back and doing some sort of activity after, but there was no evidence of that occurring. And maybe it is happening, maybe it's not. But please understand that the kids have to do some sort of academic or enrichment 21st century activities in order to be considered a 21st century student. They can't just come have a snack. I've actually heard of that happening some for after school as well, where maybe the kid stays like 30 minutes after school, has their snack, and then their parent comes and picks them up. That child should not be counted as a 21st century student if they're not participating in some sort of enrichment activity. We have to focus on this more now because of the way that we're doing your funding now, because we're basing your funding off of daily student average attendance. We have to be more mindful about who we're counting as 21st century and who we're not. It was talked about several times in the RFA that we would be looking at daily average student attendance. Now, that can be kind of difficult from what I've been told for high schools. So let me just address that really quickly. If you're running a high school program, because those students sometimes have their own vehicles, they sometimes work in the evenings, from what I hear, it seems like those students don't typically participate in 21st century every day after school. Like they don't like stay for the whole program every day. Typically they have one or two activities that they're interested in. They come and they participate in those activities and then they go home. So it could be they just come on 2 days a week. They may just come 1 day a week, whatever that case may be. Okay. So I am going to put together a team of we'll call them experts. We're going to put together a team, like a panel, to talk about how we should equitably count daily average attendance for high schools when this is the situation. Because if you've got, let me just give an example. If you said that your program was going to serve 100 kids, but you really only have 50 kids that are coming on Monday and Wednesday, and you have a different 50 kids that are coming on Tuesday and Thursday. That's 100 kids if you add it up, but your daily average attendance is 50 kids, right? That would be your daily average. If you only have 50 coming a day, that would be your daily average attendance. The thing is, what do we want to consider as coming for the day? Do we want to say that, like, what do we want to consider as being enough, they've stayed enough time to count them, right? So if they're just coming for like a 30-minute activity, is that long enough to count that child towards that daily average attendance? So that's the question. So my plan is to put together kind of a team to come together and meet of people who've been running 21st century for a while that work at the high school levels, maybe even some of our new people. We might bring in some TAs and some external evaluators, and we're just going to have a conversation about what is fair and how we need to count daily average attendance, especially at that secondary level when sometimes kids don't tend to participate every day like they do at the elementary level. And then middle school is kind of in between that. I think most of the time they participate on a daily basis, but maybe not. It may be that they're only participating for certain activities and only coming at certain times. And so we need to figure out how we're going to do that. We have time because please, if you remember from the RFA, for those of you who are there, and some of you may not know this, but we're not going to count daily average attendance against you until the end of the year 2. So you have this first year to build your program and get kids to come. And then it's towards the end of the second year that we'll really focus on your daily average attendance and determine if you need to continue to get the same amount of funding that you've gotten in the past. If you're not serving the number of kids you said you were going to serve, we may reduce funds. But we've got some time to do that and get that figured out. So we've got kind of a year to get that figured out. So I just want to make you aware of that. Okay, so it says there's a question here. If we said we would serve 55, but we have 100 registered, is our percentage based on our proposal or our number registered? Your funding is going to be based on the number of kids that participate. So really it doesn't have anything to do with how many are registered or how many you're proposed. At the end of year 2, we're going to look at how many kids have actually participated on a daily basis. And if you've met your goals, then you will keep the same amount of funding. But if you drop below, I think it's at the end of year 2, if you've met 75% of your goal of how many kids you proposed to serve, then you will keep the same funding. The next year it goes up to 85% of the proposed number. But if you're not meeting that proposed number, if your actual attendance doesn't meet that proposed number, then your funds may be reduced in the next year, for the next year. Okay? Did I explain that okay? I know I kind of stumbled around on that. So the number of kids you said that you proposed when you got your grant that you said you were going to serve, that's your proposed number of kids. This first year, we are going to try to help you build your programs. We're going to monitor the number of kids you're actually serving, but we won't cut your funds at the end of the year if you have not met that goal. The end of year 2, towards the end of that school year, we're going to look at your average daily attendance for the year. And if you met 75% of the students you said you were going to serve in year 2, then you will maintain the same number of funds. If not, then we're going to reduce your funds by the number of kids you actually are serving. Okay? Then in year 3, you need to meet 85% of the kids you said you were going to serve, or we'll reduce the funding. Actually, that's year 3 and 4. And then, of course, year 5 was the last year of the grant. So what you get each year will be based off of your student numbers from the previous year, basically, except for in that second year. The second year, we'll be looking at the previous year, but in combination, mainly we'll be looking at that second year and determine your funding based on the second year. We'll determine your funding for year 3 based on year 2's actual attendance. Okay. All right. Hopefully I answered your question. Okay. Partners, I'm not really going to touch much on this. This is just basically you need to add your partners to Easy Reports. I'm going to skip that basically. This is just how GEPRA data is used. I've really already mentioned all of these. Okay, Power School. So there's 2 times when we report data, GEPRA data, at least in the past years. I don't know, things might change this coming year. I'll find out in a little bit. But in the past, we reported data to GEPRA twice. We do it sometime around September, like after August, and sometime after March. For you, this is what we ask of for you. So we pull the Power School data for you, and we upload it into Easy Reports for you. So the first wave of data that goes to the feds is reporting on activities, staffing, and participation. Now remember, this is for the previous year. So for you guys, if you had a program in 16, you'll do this, but if you didn't have a program in 16, I don't think you have to do this part. This has been my first time being part of the program in its first year. So, but since we're reporting the data from the year before, I would not think you would need to do this part of GEPRA You may not have to do any GEPRA in the year one. I just need to check with Erica about that. And to me, it makes sense that you wouldn't have to do any data reporting for GEPRA year one. Now, if you had the grant in 16, you would have to do it. Okay. So what around August, it's in your timeline. Around August, you will complete a data check. So you'll just check to make sure that your students, your attendance, your activities, and your staff and partners are all uploaded in Easy Reports, that all of your data is as accurate and complete as possible. Okay, thank you, Erica. I just want to make sure. So she said cohort 26 will not have data reporting this year because we're reporting the 24-25 year. But that's unless there are 16, right? Is that correct? 16 will. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yay. I figured that's how it works. So we'll go over all this again before that time comes. So you'll have kind of a break this year, the first year. But just to make you aware, okay, so in March of 25, we report on outcomes and certification. And so again, we'll ask you to do a complete data check to make sure that all of your students were downloaded from PowerSchool. If you have missing data, we may ask you to fill in any missing data from students that you didn't mark as 21st Century in PowerSchool, and then you'll have to add justifications for any information that's missing. So this, when I say add justifications, this would be an example of why you might have to do that would be like the one I gave earlier, where maybe your LEA doesn't do in-school suspensions, and you may not have any data to report for that. So if that's the case, you would just go in and put in a justification as why you don't have data, and that justification would be something professionally written that says, basically in a nutshell, that your LEA does not do in-school suspensions, and so you do not have any data to report for that GEPRA measure. Okay. And then just to make you aware, the data that we do use, we've already kind of touched on this. We use reading and language arts state assessments. We use math state assessments. We use reading, language arts, and math grades, school day attendance, and in-school suspensions. That is the data that we currently we've had to report to the feds. That could change. We'll see. I will find out in about 30 minutes. Okay. All right. Let's talk about parent and family engagement activities. I mentioned these earlier, but here's some great examples of parent and family engagement activities you can do with your families. You can have family literacy nights. You could have math and STEM nights. You could do parent workshops. Those topics for those workshops could include parenting skills, mental health, digital safety, college and career readiness. You can offer those in multiple languages if you need to. You could do cultural celebrations and potlucks. So you could have, if you have a very diverse population of students, then you could have them share out their culture, the culture of their ancestors, and maybe have parents bring in a dish, a culturally appropriate dish to share. Invite parents to share customs, food, and stories. I have a funny, anyway, I'm not going to go into this, my funny story of my husband wearing a kilt at a cultural thing for my son. It was really funny. You can do volunteer and leadership opportunities. So you can ask parents to serve as volunteers. So let me say something about that really quick. As far as volunteering goes, when you have parents come in for parent and family engagement activities where it's a large activity with a huge number of people, lots of adults around, mainly it's adults that are with their child, then you don't have to worry about doing anything like fingerprinting background checks for those parents. However, if you have a parent that comes in and volunteers very frequently and could potentially be left alone with a student outside of their own child, then you might need to consider doing a fingerprinting background check. Okay, so actually you would need to do a fingerprinting background check. So an example of this may be for if they're going to be a chaperone on a field trip, especially if it's like an overnight field trip where they may have students or children other than their own in a room at night. You definitely need to do a fingerprint background check in those situations. But if there's a chance they may be alone with students, you need to do those fingerprinting background checks for those parents as well. Again, if it's just them coming in for STEM night, There's going to be lots of adults around. They're not really going to be left alone with a child outside of their own child. You don't have to do it for that. But if they're coming on a regular basis and they're often working with kids alone, or if they're going on a long field trip and could be left with children, left to chaperone children on their own, those are all reasons why you would want to go ahead and do that fingerprinting background check for those parents. Okay, you could also do homework help and academic support at home. So you could do a workshop showing parents how to support learning at home. You could provide materials for that with 21st Century funds. And then number 8 is just some best practices for effective family engagement. So try to schedule events at convenient times. You might want to do a parent survey asking them when they would prefer these events to occur. You could do some events at certain times and others at other times so that everybody has an opportunity to participate. You can use multiple communication channels such as flyers, texts, apps, in-person communication. Remind them in the line when they're picking up their child. You've got apps like Remind that are free. I would highly encourage you to take advantage of any of the great communication tools that schools tend to use to communicate with parents. You can translate material. You can use 21st Century funds to translate materials and offer interpreters for non-English speaking families. You can regularly gather parent feedback to shape programming and recognize and celebrate parent contributions. So if your parents go above and beyond, we encourage you to celebrate the extra things that they're doing for the 21st Century program and their child. Okay. I know there's a slide here about PD. I promise you I have not forgotten. So I'll get to that. Hopefully it's coming soon. If not, we'll address it at the end. Okay. So let's talk about your TA visits. We've got a little less than 30 minutes to go. Okay. And trust me, my throat and voice is feeling it. All right. So your TAs, each of you are going to be assigned 2 TAs. I will make sure, I need to add that to my list of things to send to Erica. We'll make sure that your TA and ALSDE assignments go out to you this week in the email that goes out on Friday so that you will know who your ALSDE rep is and who your TAs are. We've made a few changes because we got we have now kind of a full staff of TAs, which is great. And so each of you will actually have 2 TAs. The plan is to eventually make it where one of those TAs serves in more of a technical assistance, compliance monitoring faculty, and one of them serves as more of a coach, more of a support system to you. We are nowhere near being ready to do that yet, so we're going to work our way towards that and to developing how that's going to look. So right now you have 2 TAs that are going to be assigned to you. Hopefully both of them will be able to come out and visit you at some point or another. It could be that they split you up among them. I've kind of told them that I would prefer that they try to each come see you at some point or another. Like maybe one of them does your fall visit while the other one does your spring visit. But we'll just kind of play it by ear for now. We don't have any set requirements for that. I'm letting your 2 TAs kind of work that out amongst themselves with how they're going to make that happen. When they come out and visit your site, they're going to come ask you some questions, but they're also going to be checking for some specific documentation. So this is a list of the things that they're supposed to look for when they come out. So they're going to look at your sign in and sign out sheets and compare it to your easy report data. This is not listed here, but I have also asked them to physically count the number of students that are there, if possible, and compare it to your easy report data. You may think that's me being crazy, but my husband works for child nutrition here at the state. He's one of the auditors for child nutrition, and he often, very frequently, like all the time, sees it where schools inaccurately count the number of kids so they can get more reimbursement from the feds for lunch reimbursements. And so that is something that they have to check frequently, and they find numbers being fudged very often. And so since your funding now depends on your daily average attendance, we want to make sure that you're reporting accurate numbers. And so if you're reporting that you have 100 kids, that you're serving 100 kids, but the TAs go out and they only see 14, that's a huge red flag. Okay? So please be careful about this. Now, it could be a fluke. It could be that there was a sickness or whatever, and they just came on a bad day or whatever the case may be. But I have instructed them to let us know if that's the situation they're seeing, and then we may have them come out and do kind of an unannounced visit. The ALSD people may come out and do an unannounced visit if we are afraid that numbers are being inflated for the purpose of funding. So just be aware of that. They're going to ask to see your safety plans, your drill schedule with dates and initials that those drills were done, your daily, weekly schedule. They've been instructed to check your background checks, your fingerprinted background checks, to make sure that those have been done for your entire staff, all of your vendors, and any volunteers that you have. They may ask to see your CMP count. Again, that's something else that they want to compare. Your CMP count, that's your child nutrition, by the way, child nutrition program count. How many kids are they providing snacks for versus how many kids you're reporting in attendance? Are those numbers matching? They may ask to see your inventory sheets, lesson plans, time sheets, PARs. I'm not going to read all these to you, okay? But all of these things are things that they will check on when they come for your visits. Okay? Okay. All right. Another expectation is for program and site coordinators to do their own observations. So we have an observation form. There is a link here to the observation form that you can print out. There's also a fillable observation form if you prefer to type your answers into the form, but this should be completed at least one time for each teacher for reflecting the components of the program. So program directors, just to let you know, are expected to visit all of the sites that they're over. We say on a weekly basis. I would be okay with that being bi-weekly if needed. If you have a large number of sites and you can't get to every single one of those sites every week, that is not a huge concern as long as you're at least going to see them every 2 weeks. But if you only have 1 or 2 sites, you should be able to visit them on a weekly basis. While you're there visiting, you could be doing one of these staff observations. You could be observing your site coordinators and making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, or one of the teachers. It could be that you split it up between you and the site coordinators. Your site coordinators could do some of these observations for you, but each teacher should be observed, and then for each component that they teach, I think is what this is. This is not the best constructed sentence, but I think what they're saying here is that if you have a teacher that teaches multiple enrichment activities, then you want to observe each of those enrichment activities that they're teaching at some point during the year, just one time during the year, and provide them with some feedback. It's just like what administrators have to do for teachers during the school day. We expect you guys to do the same thing and provide that observation and feedback to your staff. Okay, finally, we're on staff professional development. I told you it was coming. Okay, so you are expected to provide ongoing professional development to your staff. All 21st century staff must complete and document 10 PD professional development hours per year, okay? And you are supposed to report those in Easy Reports, which is where this slide came from. It came from an Easy Reports presentation, which is what this last bullet is referring to, is how to put that into Easy Reports. But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on the requirements for PD. So a question was asked a little while ago that I didn't address at the time. Let me go back to it. ACEA conference, is it required for program and site directors? So in the past, ACEA has always been required for program directors and site coordinators. But to be honest with you, I did not know that when I wrote the RFA, and I did not put that in the RFA. But that's actually turned out to be a good thing because we now are, I've worked, the people who are planning this year's conference, we've met and we've talked about what's best. And really, this year's conference is not going to be like it has been in the past. There's not going to be necessarily a 21st century focus. And when I say that, I don't mean there's not going to be things there that will benefit 21st century. Everything there is going to benefit 21st century, but it's also going to benefit other out-of-school time programming, whether it's after school or during the summer. The focus is going to be more about best practices for those people who actually work with the students. And so, no, I'm not requiring program directors or site coordinators to go to ACEA. They can go. If they can afford to go, I'm absolutely on board for them to go. But what I would prefer is that they find a way for their staff to go to ACEA. I'm not requiring it, but highly, highly encouraging it. So we are encouraging this so much that we are giving you guys permission to actually close your after-school program during the 3 days of the ACEA conference, which is November the 17th through the 19th. It's going to be occurring in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, at the big fancy Muscle Shoals Renaissance, Resort and Spa. Lindsay, if you have the link to it, you can put it in the chat. That would be great. I think Jennifer did it earlier. But we really would love to see you send your teachers, your assistants, your assistant staff, any adults who would benefit from learning best practices. Any adults who work directly with students are encouraged to go to the conference. I'm also planning on scheduling a meeting, like a virtual meeting for principals, and I'm going to invite all the principals of your schools to that meeting, and part of that meeting will be just me encouraging them to allow your staff to go, because I understand that sometimes it's the principals that keep staff from going to things, because the same people who work for your 21st century program are the teachers that work during the day. But I'm going to try to encourage them to allow those staff to go to that training. You can actually go ahead and register for that conference now and use FY25 funds to pay for it. And then you will use FY26 funds when they drop in October to actually pay for reimbursement for travel and things like that. So that could definitely, thank you. Oh, Erica got it. Perfect. Thank you, Erica. So she put in the link for ACEA registration. Someone asked in this morning's meeting if teacher assistants could go. I'm fine with that as long as they're not like high school students. You know, of course, you wouldn't want kids to miss school to go to the conference, but if you've got people that help as assistants to your program that have graduated and this is their main job and they're adults and they can handle an overnight travel situation for a few nights and you have the funds to do so, I'm perfectly fine with you sending them to ACA as well. And again, I'm not saying that site coordinators and program directors can't go. I'm just saying that if you had to pick one or the other, I would prefer for you to send the actual boots on the ground staff, the people that actually work with the students to this conference, than the site coordinator and project director. But of course, everybody's welcome. There's going to be something there for everyone that will benefit everyone. But I don't plan on having any specific sessions that just apply to site coordinators and program directors at the 21st century level. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, and that could definitely serve as your 10 hours of PD for your staff. But if ACA is not in the cards, if you can't get principals to let teachers go, then you can provide PD to your staff in other ways. Your orientation could count towards part of that PD. There's lots of online professional development that you can provide for them that they can do online. I can provide you with some links to that if you need it. You could just have your own professional development or bring some people in to do PD for your staff. But I still feel like ACEA is the way to go, and I hope that you guys will take advantage of that. Just remember that if you do decide to close your after-school program for ACEA that you let parents know immediately as soon as your program starts at the beginning of the year. It needs to be part of the orientation. It needs to be in the student handbook, and you need to be reminding them frequently leading up to November that your program is going to be closed for those 3 days so that they can find an alternative place for their children to go during those 3 days. As long as you're letting them know in plenty of time to find a place for them to go, then that should not be a problem at all. Okay, but if you do close your program down, then most of your staff needs to be going to ACEA. So don't close your program down if only 1 or 2 people are going, unless you can't run your program without those couple of people. So just be mindful, you know, don't take advantage. do the right thing. And if a majority of your staff is going to ACEA, you can close your program down. If you can still run your program, if only like 1 or 2 people are going and you can still run your program, then you need to leave it open. Okay. All right.